Hello everybody. I'm just looking at all the screens and seeing that everything is looking good. My audio looks like it's working. I'm waiting for YouTube to catch up with the live because there's always a little bit of a delay. If you are here in the comments, go ahead and say hello. I'd love to hear from you. I know the live streams tend to be a little quiet, and that's okay, but if you are here, pop in. Speaking of which, I should always get the business stuff out of the way, and that is that if you found me by accident and you're not already a subscriber to my channel, you won't be able to leave me any comments for at least 20 minutes after you subscribe, and that is just to keep the trolls out, because I am here all by myself, and moderating comments can get difficult if a troll gets in there. So if you would like to leave me comments, go ahead, subscribe, wait that 20 minutes, you can leave me some comments, and then if you don't want to stick around after that, no worries, you can just unsubscribe and move on to other YouTube channels. So that is the basics of the business getting started. Welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. You have reached me here at my Advent All Year live stream series. And that is where I take the Spellbinders Crafty Advent Calendar from 2025, December 2025, and I mix it up for cards throughout the year, and I use the items in unusual ways when I can think of those, and keep the fun rolling all year long for 2026. So that is the plan for tonight. Often I will have a little bit or a lot of die cutting homework. Tonight I think we're going to do all the die cutting live, and I think we'll be able to get through it. So if you have followed along with me and have not crafted along in the past because of how much die cutting there is, maybe tonight you can do it live with me, because I'm going to be doing it as we go. All right, I'm thinking that we're all set and ready to get started. So let me switch the cameras and show you the project we're working on tonight. And I do put up the plans for these projects on my, I didn't get it up on my blog this time, on my YouTube channel and the Facebook group. And I try to get it on Instagram and my blog as well, but I totally spaced those this time. So if you're watching this on replay, you can find the information down below on how to get the craft along instructions. So now I'm ready to switch cameras. There we go. I will stay with you up in the corner throughout the stream, and we will be able to get started with this card. So this card was inspired by these pieces, and in the Crafty Advent Calendar die set, these pieces are actually, I'm trying to find the die over on my side, these pieces actually look like this. And these are little feet to some toast, a smiling, dancing piece of toast with arms and legs. So I took the legs of the toast and I turned them into music notes. I have found multiple uses for this die so far, and this is the kind of outside of the box thinking that I like to share on these streams when I can think of alternative ideas of what to do with die. So this whole card concept came from wanting to use music notes on something. We do have the phone set in our Advent supplies, so I thought this could be a great way to combine these music note pieces with the corner die that we got in our set, and here is what that looks like. This corner die stumped a lot of people when we first got it because they didn't quite know what to do with it, but I have found so many different ways. It's been waves, it's been roads, it's been forests, now it's a sound wave. So I am finding lots and lots of uses for just something that's so basic. So we are going to make ourselves some sound waves and a little message coming out of the phone that says happy birthday. Now, I did not line this all up as well as I wanted to, and the edge of my happy birthday message got cut off. So I'm going to try shifting my design tonight just a little bit. We are going to need our dies out because we will be die cutting live tonight. I see, oh, Donna's here in the chat. Hi. Donna says, my husband asked me if I had an idea of what the card would be tonight based on the dies pulled. I told him he didn't have a clue, so I stumped you. I do put a little sneak peek in my instructions of what we're working on, so that gives you a little idea of what we might be doing. So there you go, Donna. Now you know. We are going to be using these dies, and then of course we need our telephone die, which is in my magnetic bowl, so I've got to get it off the magnet. And I did create my message with the stamp set from our advent calendar. This was day 11, and it said, I heard it's your birthday. So we're going to hear this message over the phone and use that to do our message here. I did start my card with a piece of pattern paper, and if you have pattern paper in your stash, this is something with a subtle background texture to help all the colors pop off of. I did mention in my instructions that I would show you a tip. If you didn't have any kind of pattern paper like this, I would show you a tip on making your own. And so that is what this little piece is right here. This is a piece of fun foam. And from this fun foam, I used these particular dies to cut some objects. So this was the roller skate wheels, the layer for the wheels from the roller skate die set. This was the decoration for the roller skate from that same die set. I believe this little oval, I think that was from the toast set, correct me if I'm wrong. And then this star set, I believe, was from the Magic Rabbit Out of the Hat set. So I die cut those out of fun foam, and I mounted them on a stamp block. So I don't know if anyone has ever done this technique before, but you can make your own stamps from dies, fun foam, and a little adhesive to keep everything mounted and make your own stamps. So that is definitely one thing through this series I wanted to share in case you didn't already know that technique. And here is how I started stamping my own background pattern paper. This is just scrap paper from my stash. And again, I'm just using this for an example. I'm not going to use this on my project tonight. But I used some gray ink instead of solid black because I wanted it to be in the background, and I think black would pop a little too much and take away too much attention from the rest of the card design. So I am going to, I used, you can see it there, it's just a temporary adhesive roller, and I just rolled it on my block itself because it's hard to get that onto the little foam pieces. I just stick my foam pieces on there. When I'm done with this, I can just throw those away and clean the adhesive off with some alcohol. So it's pretty easy to make your own stamp sets. And then at this point, it's just a matter of rotating your block to get a pattern. And you can see the stamping that I did just now is much darker, but dye-based inks tend to dry back and settle out. So if you don't know what your inks look like once they're dry versus once they're wet, go ahead and give yourself some swatches so you know. All right, so that was just a little bonus technique I wanted to cover before we start with the card itself. Let me set these off to the side. And we can start. Oh, I do have a little ink on my desk. We can go ahead and start with our card. So I chose a purple card base, but you can choose whatever. And you know, I pulled up some graphics. Let me see if I can get those up. This, because I wanted to use the telephone, it reminds me of my childhood in the 80s growing up. And so I pulled up a couple of graphics that helped me come up with the design for this card. So here, I can move this around a little bit. Here is our 80s graphics with all of these funky geometric shapes, which gave me the idea for the background pattern paper and, you know, the technique that we just did. So that was one thing that inspired me. And the second thing that inspired me was this color palette. So I pulled out colors from my stash that were similar. I did not get exact colors on there, but let me move this over down into the corner and I can pull out the colors that I have. And let's see, got a little bit of a pile here. So I've got, instead of that brighter pink, I have kind of a fuchsia pink. And then that is a bright, bold blue, but I have more of a minty blue. And then of course we need some yellow and some of that purple. Mine is a bit darker, but that's okay. And then tomatoey red is how I described it on the instructions. So there is my tomato red. And I've got my background pattern paper and a card base, and I did end up throwing in one extra color because when I was cutting my shapes I needed one more color in there because I didn't want to repeat the yellow. So I have this, I want to call it limey green, but I know actual limes are dark, but that is our kind of fluorescent-y limey green, however you want to call it. All right, so let's start with our die cutting because that will take a little bit of time because we do need to die cut this same die out of each of these colors, which means we will have a lot of pieces left over. So you can end up making a lot of cards. You'll just alternate the colors that you have left over, and these will end up being different colors on each card. So I'm gonna get that started. Definitely will need some tape as I'm trying to use up all of the space on my scraps of paper and not waste any of this. I do like to get as many things onto a pass of my die cut machine as possible, but since I have to run this multiple times, I shouldn't worry about it too much, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So I'm gonna take a scrap of this and get my phone handle on there. And actually that might be it because I am I need more sticky tape because my tape has been through the die cut machine so many times. It's on its last legs and I need some fresh tape. All right. So here is the tray that I have from when I made the sample card. I've got all of these pieces left over so you can see that you'll be able to make multiple cards with this particular idea. So we will just add to that tray the new pieces that I cut so that I can get the exact same, oh, I forgot that graphic, sorry guys. There we go, now we can see everything again. I'm gonna do the exact same color arrangement as I did on my sample. So I will need to cut this all the correct number of times and put my pieces in my tray. And don't miss any. And then as I work, we'll get the table cleared up. Okay, we are gonna need this green one here. So Donna, are you going to craft along afterwards, or do you have stuff ready to go to do it with me tonight? And then I think we're done with that one, so I'm gonna put that away. What else can I grab on here? This is for the sentiment, which I'll be honest, I struggled with the sentiment. I think we'll do that later. Let's go ahead and get our phone on here. And I actually did die cut stacking for our phone. Let's see if we can get, you can see the thickness there. I think I did 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, but for the fourth layer, I've got a technique for you. So I'm just gonna do a couple of layers. Scratch that. Let's come back to the phone because I realized what I did earlier would be a good idea to share. So let's go ahead and not let that sneak out. Let's get that one cut. And then, oh, I forgot to mention the black. So I do have black here for our music notes. We will use that. So what do you call this color? Ah, Donna is trying to craft along. Awesome. So hopefully I've got a paste that will work for that. Luckily, I will take a little time to explain things here and there, so that should make sure that you know what to do. Just keep grabbing your next color in the stack. We do need to cut the purple, which actually I had a piece here already cut, so I can save that other scrap for another time. And we can use as much of this one as possible. We do need to cut our little feet or our music notes multiple times. So let's go ahead and get that on here as we work, because we're gonna need many of those guys. And I do have a little trick for this. I try to put this near the edge with the opening of the feet sticking up, and then we can kind of alternate nesting the die back and forth in that opening and get a little more space out of our paper, if that makes sense. Hopefully the next pass will make a little more sense. All right, let's get these going in there. I was hoping Michelle would join us tonight. I haven't talked to her in a while because I've been so busy, and I know she moved recently, so if you're watching on replay, Michelle, I've been thinking about you, hoping that you're settled into your new place and that you're getting some crafty time in. I think you had a better setup for your craft space in the new place as far as I remember, so hopefully you're enjoying that. Okay, here is our single legs. Let's go ahead and take that off. And here's what I'm talking about. We're going to rotate it upside down so we can kind of tuck it in and around the previous one. You don't have to be as thrifty as I like to get with my paper, but it is something I like to stretch my scraps as far as they can go. Because we pay for this paper, we don't want to throw it away when we can find ways to get more use out of it. So that is our second run. I think altogether I cut out 4. I think I cut out 4 of the legs to turn into music notes. So that is what I'm going to go for tonight. And there is leg number 2. And here is our fuchsia pink. And we'll get those in there. All right, let's move our legs over so we can do this all again. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get the second one to tuck in there. We'll see. We'll see. All right. I guess it doesn't really matter which way it goes since I'm just getting started with this yellow piece. So we'll get that on there. And I did have to pull that one out because my other yellow scrap was getting too small for doing our corner piece. Oh, you know what? I did not do the corner piece out of yellow. That's why. All right. Well, if you cut it out of yellow, then you'll have more options down the road. But it ends up that I'm not going to use that one. So I will just set these in my extra pile of pieces. And do something with those later. So here we go. We've got 3 leg pieces now. We've got 1 more color of our corner to do. And then we'll get to our phone handle technique. So set that aside, and we're actually cleaning up as we go so we don't have to worry about as much mess. All right, that should be the last of our corner pieces. I will set those in there and make sure I keep my tape handy. Oh, it cut through both layers. So let's get this guy out. There's the, maybe I just set it down wrong. Maybe that's what I did. All right, let's get our 4th set of legs. I think maybe I can just barely squeeze that on there. All right, well that's in there. Put that off to the side. Let's go ahead and talk about the telephone. So this is what the telephone die looks like, and obviously we're just going to use the handle part. So we will just snip off where it's connected to the phone itself, and we don't have to cut out the entire thing. What I did with mine, you can see some of this distressed detail, and that's what I was going for, because you know how grimy the handles of those phones used to get back in the 80s, because they were up next to your face all the time, you were touching it all the time, so they would get grimy and the color would start to wear thin where you picked it up all the time. So I definitely wanted to give that a bit of the distressed look. So how I did that was by inking my die before I die cut it. And this process is a little tricky. There's no science to getting this how you want it to be. This is trial and error, and this is a case of doing it multiple times and keeping the one you like the best of the bunch. So I have a Concord & Ninth Sunflower ink pad, and this I believe is a Spellbinders cardstock, but it's a shade darker than my cardstock. So whatever color combo you want to use, my phone was yellow growing up, so that's what I think of for sure when I am thinking of old rotary telephones. Shade darker than your cardstock, and Concord & Ninth ink pads have foamy pads to them. Some brands of ink pads have more of a fabric, or they're called felt pad to them, which don't release the ink as easily, so you'll have to give a little more pressure when we're doing this. So what I'm going to do is take the face of my die, the details of the die, and press it down into the ink pad. I am not going to press very hard because the squishy ink pads release a lot of ink, which will make the entire die inky, and then we won't have that contrast between the dark ink and the softer color of the cardstock. And again, this is trial and error, so I'm just going to give it a couple of taps, and then I'm going to take a look, and you can see how much ink transferred onto the background of the die. I'm going to go ahead and die cut this to show you what it looks like. But since I die cut stack my phone with 4 or 5 layers, I'm going to do this 4 or 5 times and keep the one I like the best. So this can be a little finicky to make sure it doesn't slip and smudge. Just do the best you can, and like I said, we're doing this multiple times so we can keep the one we like the best. So I'm just going to kind of tip it up, rest my finger there, and then drop it down. And this should give me a die cut. Now it looks like it might slide off the edge a little bit, but since that will be a layer possibly underneath, it won't matter too much if it's cut off just a little bit. And when I do this technique, I like to make sure I have a shim in my die cut sandwich, because that's going to give a little bit more pressure to the raised areas of the die that are intended to leave impressions of detail, but that's going to work in our advantage when we ink up those indentations. It's going to catch more ink on those areas and give us more detail to our die. So I like this technique, and I like to use a shim so that it gives a better impression. So like I said, this one had too much ink on there, so I'm going to do this multiple times and try and get the ink level that I like. In the meantime, we are finished die cutting our little feet or music notes, however you want to think of them at this point in time. And I'm going to put that die away. I do like to clean out my die every time I run it through, because if you let too many bits accumulate in there, it can be hard to clean it out later. So I do prefer to do that. I'm going to set this aside because we're going to trim that and use that in one of our layers, cleaning up some of the excess. And you know what, I am going to go ahead and get some fresh tape, because that tape has really had it. a little fresh tape. Fresh tape is a little too sticky for my liking, so I always give it a press on the back of my hand. And let's try this technique again. I am going to wipe it off in between just to get the excess ink out of the background. Usually it does a pretty solid impression and it gets most of the ink off the die, but just in case, I do want to clean in between. And let's do this again, and I'm going to just try and get it lighter taps. And here's the thing, lighter taps are easier to add more ink to. So you can see these raised areas picked up a little bit of the ink, but I want these raised areas to have a little bit of the ink as well. So that was too light. Let's go ahead and do it again. Oh, we got more on the handles of the phone. We're getting there. I'm just going to press up here to try. Oh, now I've got quite a bit. Okay, so we'll send that one through and we'll see how it goes. I'm going to get that inky lid out of the way because I feel like I'm running into it. All right, and then this one can go through. I do really like to tape my dies down when I am doing these inky impressions because any slippage will smear that ink in general. So tape is definitely your friend for this technique. And let's see how we did. All right, I like this one better. It definitely has more open areas, but here it's looking kind of blobby, so we're gonna keep going. It looks like that bit already came out. And I might need to move over. I think I can get one more cut out of this one, and then I'll need to move over to my other piece. Okay, so let's see how we do this time. Tap, 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 tap. Take a look, and you know, if you realize that it's not what you want, you can just go ahead and wipe it down and try again. You don't have to leave it all up to chance in the end. So I'm gonna maybe just tap in the middle here to see. Oh, that gave me more than I wanted to. So maybe if I just wipe through that section. Let's see what happens when I run that through the die cutter. I'm going to move it all the way up here and fold it down into place and run it through. And again, we can see how the color is lightening back as it dries. You can see this one is still darker because it hasn't dried all the way. So if you don't like it right away, do let it dry, come back to it and see if you like it better after it's dried. All right, let's see how this one looks. Oh, there it is. I like that one better. We'll see. I'm going to keep trying. Okay, I think this one is done for me. I will clean that up. My plate is starting to bow that way, so I am going to flip it over and start die cutting on the other side. It's good, especially depending on your die cut machine, to rotate your plates. My machine is particularly bad at bowing dies, so, and when I use my shim, that makes it even worse. So I do have to rotate my plates on a very regular basis. But it's different depending on your machine. I had a Sizzix manual machine for years and years, and I never rotated my plates, and I didn't have any problems. So yeah, it's just what you've got. Okay, I'm gonna, you know, you could even maybe get a Q-tip or something like that to get some of that excess ink off, and I'm just gonna clean it up just a little bit, and we'll give this one a try. So this will be number 4, and if I don't like this one as well, we'll try for number 5, and then after that, it is what it is. go. I know when I did the sample, it was the very last one that I got the one that I wanted, so that worked out nicely. You know, I like that quite a bit. Oops, let me show it to you. I like how it has a little distressing here, but it has darker edges here, and that kind of reminds me of maybe the phone started off as a darker yellow, and through the ages of holding it and rubbing it against your face in these areas, that's where it wore off the color. So I kind of like that one. Did I do 5 for this stack? I'm going to go ahead and cut one more. I'm not going to ink this one up, but if you haven't gotten the inking that you like yet, you can go ahead and do it one more time. And I'm going to clean up right now so that I don't have to worry about that in a minute, and it might give you a chance to kind of catch up with me. And again, the cleanup isn't that hard, just a little water and a little rag. And these little bits will just go whoop right on my floor because I will vacuum later. And the cats like to play with the mess on the floor anyway, so it's a cat toy, right? Okay, this will be, speaking of cat, she heard me talking about her. They get dinner at 5 o'clock, so around 4 o'clock they always say, hey, it's dinner time, and I say, no, it's not. So that is what she is thinking about right now. All right, and then that is, we will do a little more die cutting when we get to our sentiments, but that is it for the moment. So I'm going to set the die cutting stuff off to the side, and we can work on a little bit of assembly stuff. And how are we doing on time? We are doing great on time. So I think this project is going to work out nicely for everyone to be able to finish right along. And then you'll have all those leftover pieces for doing more cards later. All right, I'm going to grab my scissors. I'm going to grab my glue. I will need some tweezers. I don't think I put that on the list, but hopefully you just have tweezers nearby in your craft space when I get to the music notes, because my poor little fingers can't hold on to those tiny music notes. So let's snip off the excess to these dies that we don't need. I just came in and snipped off straight across. It's not exactly perfect with the alignment of the phone, but it's good enough. And I don't think anybody will notice. So just snip off each of those pieces, and they will become cat toys at my house until I vacuum. A little bit of a snip. Oop, that one, I thought it didn't come off all the way. Okay. All right, cat toys. This was the one I liked the best, so I'm just going to start. I'm going to leave that one off to the side, and I'm going to start stacking. But we do want to make sure that we get our little phone cord. I mean, you don't have to have the phone cord, but I want to put the phone cord in there, and you can do the same inky technique on the phone cord if you want. I didn't this time. It's just kind of, I don't know why, just because. It's a smaller die, maybe that's why. Let's see. It also doesn't have as many raised areas, or any raised areas like the phone handle. So that is another reason why I did not do that. So my little phone cord is hiding in here. The die is intended for this larger blocky end to be glued into the phone, but I wanted my phone cord to curve this way and hang off the edge of my card. So I actually glued it in with the smaller blocky end. So let's do that. And I glued it not on the very bottom or on the bottom layer, but I glued it a couple layers in so that it would have more dimension to the cord as well. So that is my plan. I will add glue to this bottom layer, add one more layer on top for our die cut stacking. Let's see, I think that's where I glued it in, but I'm gonna do one more, make it a little more dimensional this time. Let's see, I like to put the glue on the bottom layer and then add to the top. And these ones are pretty easy to line up. Depending on your snipping, that might not be perfect, but really nobody's gonna notice. Okay, now I want to add my cord in here. And because I want my phone to rotate, I'm gonna kind of add the cord in kind of at a 90-degree angle, if that makes sense. And I'm going to want my phone to rotate even more on my second try of this card because, like I said, this stuff ended up flowing off the edge. So I want to rotate the whole design a little bit so that everything flows up to the top. I was going for kind of a diagonal look on this card, but it didn't have enough room for my idea. So we're going to alter it up. All right, so there's my phone cord. Let's get this next layer on top of there. And glue that down. And then our final layer can go right on top. You know what? I think I can get rid of the tape from the back of my hand at this point. That's where my tape lives constantly when I'm die cutting. Donna said her cats used to be the same way about dinner. Yeah, Willow just came up and tapped my leg to say, hey, because that's what she does when it's dinner time. And I ignored her. All right, so our phone is ready. I'm just gonna set it off to the side to do a little more drying, and we're gonna move on to cutting our card base and punching out our background, and then we can do some more assembly. So I have more of that black scrap paper. I have a 1 3/4 inch circle punch. You can do this with circle dies. And you could even try going a little bit bigger with the circle dies. So I tried a couple of different sizes and I just liked the focus of this one that hones in on the part of the phone that is making the sound. So that is why I went with that size. Here we go. Easy peasy to use a punch. And I'm going to leave this off to the side because we will use that for our message in a little bit. Let's see, that piece is not the right size. Let's see, you have a bigger scrap. This is just very, very thin pattern paper, so it is great for doing a layer on a card. And that means I will need my trimmer. I did trim this to leave a little bit of a border. So we've got 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches for this piece. So 4 inches by 5 1/4 for this piece. And here is my pre-made card base. It looks like it is a little off with the folding there, but it'll still do with that. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue this down. Okay. And I like to just eyeball it when it comes to that border. And I can even open up my card to make sure I can see all the way around. Close it back up to make sure the same is true on that side. And just kind of wiggle it into place. I know there are tools out there that help line up these layers like this, but I just eyeball it. All right, now we can start gathering our pieces. I think I might want to lay my card flat like that because when it's closed, it pops up and things will slip and slide. So I'm going to lay my card out flat. I'm going to think about angling my card, and let's bring this one in so we can see side by side. I'm going to think about angling my phone a little bit differently so that my information goes up this way. And I am going to snip off this extra piece, maybe right there. At first I wanted it to hang off all the way to the edge of the card, but this one is going to go to the edge of my layer, I think, and we'll make that work. Okay, and then I've used my dark purple tiny piece as the first one, and because this purple is so dark, the reason I didn't use a piece up here is that it almost looks black when it's not next to something else, and I didn't want it to look black off by itself. So when I place the purple on top of the black, you can see the color contrast, and I'm even able to see it on the screen, so hopefully you could see that. Let's do it again. So there's the purple on top of the black, and it looks like purple, but if I move it farther away, it looks like black. So that is a trick that our eyes and our brain have to do when we're perceiving color. So that is some of the things I think about when I'm thinking about color. Like I said, I used that color inspiration because I didn't really know what colors I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted an 80s feel, and I had to go and look and remind myself what that meant. So the next piece is this fuchsia pink piece, and I wanted it to hang off the end of the black so that we didn't get a weird gap that had both the black and the white to it. Am I going to be able to pull that off this time? I think I might need to move, and this is why I haven't glued anything down yet, because I knew I had problems with getting things aligned how I liked them, so I didn't want to glue things down and then regret needing to move something. So I think what I'm going to do is leave bigger gaps on this card so that my pink one goes all the way off the edge of the black, and I will just get the background pattern paper in between. All right, next up is lime green, and that's not the right size. Finding the right size, I think, is the hardest part of this project. So there we go, lime green, and then oh, that's my tomato red. I called it the fuchsia, but see, even I'm getting confused. So this is more of the fuchsia. That one, it looks too big. So let's get the next size in the fuchsia color, and then our final largest size in that bluey teal. Okay, now that that's in place, what I'm going to do is pull out this piece of tape, and I'm going to tape these down just to kind of hold them there, and then I can lift up, oops, sorry, that was probably loud on the microphone. I can lift up one element at a time and get it in place without the other pieces slipping and sliding on me. So I'm going to get that phone cord right to the edge of my paper and glue. Notice I only put glue on this side. I can add glue onto that afterwards, but I want to make sure I get these other pieces in place before everything slides around. And I'm still going to lift that up to glue under there, so I didn't want to glue the whole entire phone in place just yet. All right, and then with these pieces being taped in place, the tape will work like a little hinge so that I can add some glue. And it doesn't need a lot because these are just going to be set in place. They're not going to have to hold up to any wear and tear or anything. So before the glue is completely dry, I do kind of want to make sure that they're kind of angled how I want them to be angled. And that one's a little bit higher than I intended, so there we go. That is it. And then for the rest of them, since they're just individual pieces and they're not overlapping anything, I can just glue them in place and I don't have to worry about any tape hinge or anything. Again, I'm just eyeballing the spacing between the pieces. You could measure if you need to, but I don't like measuring. It's too much work for me. And I'm lazy, so I'm not going to measure. I am, however, going to get a drink of water, so if you need a little bit of time to catch up to where I'm at, that will give you just a moment. Even though the weather has cooled off here, we had 90-degree weather, and then yesterday it cooled off quite a bit and started raining. But the house is still holding on to some of that heat from the 90-degree days, and it is warm in my space, and I should have opened the window to get some of that fresh air, but I forgot. So I am feeling very warm. All right. So let's go ahead and do our music notes. I'm going to grab these guys from my pile. And if you come up with any ideas for what to do with all these excess pieces, if it's, you know, different than from what we're doing tonight, I'd love to see them. If you're not already a part of the Facebook group, that's the best place to share them. And I will leave links, if you're watching on replay, I'll leave links down below so that you can find that. It is a closed group. It's just for people who are subscribed to my channel, which I debated on, but there's so many groups out there that I wanted to make sure that we would be able to see projects kind of inspired by what we're doing. So that's why I decided to do it that way. I might change my mind in the future, so we'll see. All right, we've got our little feet, and we're going to turn these into music notes. So let me see if I can maybe put a piece of white paper down. You know, I did not think about having more contrast so that you could see better. All right, so I've got my music note. I'm actually going to hold on to it with my tweezers. That will get my fingers out of your way so you can see better. And I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm not going to cut it straight in half. I'm going to angle my scissors to give this more of a music note look. So I'm going to angle my scissors probably at like a 45-degree angle or so, and I'm going to snip. Can you see? Can you see how that leaves an angle on the edge of the music note so that it looks more like a music note and not just like this weird thing that we cut off? So that's that. And this is pretty cool that it landed upside down because I am using my music notes in both directions on our example. And while, okay, I do know how to read music and I know a little bit about music theory, but I don't know what the stacked notes are called. So I'm doing a little bit of note stacking to get a little more dense look to some of the notes, a little more variety to our notes. So we're going to use these notes both right side up, upside down, and also stacked so that we get some variety. And in order to do that, we need to cut all of our notes apart. So I need to use my other hand because I'm a righty when it comes to scissors. But I can do tweezers with my left hand, so that is how I'm handling this. So that's our third little set of feet / music notes. And here is our fourth. All right, I'm just gonna follow this pattern like I did. It did take me a while to kind of move things around and see how I liked them. So do it how you want to do it. You can move it around until it's in positions that you liked. Now I did rotate my thing a little bit, so I will have to move them just a little bit, but I had an upside down one down in the right. Let's see, a right side one up here, and this is definitely shifted closer to my edge, so I'm not getting as much space between these notes on the new card as on the old card. So I will have to shift ideas just a little bit, and I'm kind of rotating my notes a little bit to give them more undulation and movement, like they're flowing out of the phone. All right, let's see, this is a note, stacked note that actually goes the other way. So we're gonna flip these ones over to make them go the other way. It doesn't really matter how you do it. Well, I like that overlap there. I'm gonna put just a smidge of glue on that stem and overlap it more than that one is overlapped. I overlapped it at the top of the note. For this one, I'm overlapping the tail of the note to the stem of the next note. Please correct me. I'm sure somebody out there watching knows the names of these parts better than I do. I haven't played a musical instrument since I was in the 80s, so it has definitely been a while for me. I did think about going back. I played clarinet in junior high, and I stopped before I moved on to high school because I had heard scary things about the high school music teacher, and I was not up for that. I am a very nervous person, so I don't think I could have handled an intense music teacher. That would not have worked for me. I do regret it though. I wish I had kept going, and I've thought about going back as an adult to playing the clarinet again, although I don't know when or where I would play besides just for myself at home, because it's not like the guitar where you could bust it out at gatherings and just have fun making music together. So I don't know. I did try to learn to play the guitar, and I was very bad at that. So that one didn't work out. All right, let's look at this next music note. So I'm flipping them upside down this way, and I'm going to use this one because I like the angle of that tail better. And I think I'm going to do the same thing where I overlap them on that stem because I like that better. So yes, tweezers are definitely my friend in this case. I don't want to leave too much glue on this white paper because it's some work papers that I need to take care of. And then I'm going to glue that one in place. And I'm going to kind of glue it off to this side because I want to leave room for our message to get through and to fit. I'm going to glue that one there. All right, that looks good. I do have one little music note left, so I'll just set it in my tray for now, and if I decide I want to add it. At first I thought I wanted one coming right up out of the phone, but the color contrast isn't there, and it's not noticeable enough, so that did not work. But if you use other colors, like if you have got one of these lime green baby pieces coming up out of here, then you could potentially add that extra music note so that you can see it coming up out of the phone. So yeah, you can try it with different color combos. All right. I feel like sometimes I need to have a drinking game. Every time I say all right, take a drink, because it's one of the phrases, especially when I'm editing pre-recorded videos, it's one of the phrases that I have to cut out of my audio quite a lot. Timing. We're almost at 5. We are going to wrap up this card with our sentiment. I tried various ways of doing the sentiment. I tried heat embossing with white heat embossing powder, but that always causes little speckles of white ending up everywhere on projects. And then I tried white ink, and my white ink pad was drier. I think tonight I pulled out a different white ink pad. I think for the sake of time, I am just going to stamp this with white ink. I will use my stamp positioner so that I can stamp it multiple times to get a nice thick layer of ink so that it shows up nice and solid on top of my black sentiment strips. I am going to stamp it first and then die cut after, because I find that I can line up the die with my sentiment, but I can't necessarily line up the sentiment on top of an already die cut piece. Do what works best for you. I did have my die out, or my stamp out already on a block, which I thought I put with all of my supplies, but it is currently, ooh, paper trimmer. Oh. Heart check, mine is working. How about you? Going back to what I was saying, I did have my stamp on a block, and I thought I had set it here. So why don't you go ahead and catch up with where I'm at, and I will continue looking for my stamp. Well, that is not a good thing. I will also pick up my trimmer. I don't think I broke it. That's good news. I have done that in the past and broken my trimmer, and it's no fun to pay for buying a brand new tool that you broke for being careless instead of buying fun goodies. Okay. I thought I had it mounted on this stamp block, but I used this one for mounting the homemade foam stamp. And I know I specifically wanted to talk about cutting apart your stamps. It is something I do all the time because I find it makes my stamps way more flexible, both literally and figuratively, in my crafting world. So I like to cut my stamps apart, and I was going to show you how that could be used to your advantage on today's project. Another stamp block, but no stamp. Oh, you know what? I know where it is. Yep. I forgot. I ended up moving because I was hand stamping a lot of the time. Oh, I didn't get these ones. I didn't get these ones glued down. I just had them in place. Let me do that. Okay, let's do the tip test. All right, we've got it all now. Stamps are in my stamp positioner. This is a Sizzix stencil and stamp tool or something like that. They've changed the name since it came out. And I like this one because I can get large sheets of paper in there. A lot of people like their MISTI stamping tools, which took me a while to get used to since my name is Misty, not spelled the same. But took me a while to get used to saying that word over and over, not associated with myself. Black cardstock for our sentiment. Let's go ahead and grab this piece. All right, here is my stamp, and I will put it on here so you can see. The stamp comes produced like this. I took my thin scissors and I cut right apart in between these words so that I could use the words separately from each other. If you're the kind of person who is not going to cut your stamp apart, that's okay. What you're going to need to do is use some tape and cover up your word, ink it up, take off your tape, and stamp. You're going to have to do that multiple times if you're using white ink on black paper to get it saturated enough with ink for it to show up well. Donna cut stamps apart, and she's using the tape method there. So yes, I am going to use mine separately because that is how I like to work. So I'm going to make sure it's mounted. It's totally crooked on my stamp platform. It doesn't matter because I am going to be lining it up with my die cut, my die to die cut it out after the fact. So I just want to make sure that I've got enough room on my cardstock to get 2 pieces cut out because I did break up my sentiment into 2 parts. So I'm going to do one down here and one over here. So I'm going to move my paper over this way so that I can get my sentiment there. And I'm going to ink, 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 and stamp. And these stamps from the Spellbinders kit are not photopolymer. They are not my favorite stamps at all because this, I don't know if it's acrylic or I can't remember what the other material is, but they're very squishy, so if you put too much pressure on them, you're going to blow out your letters and get blobs. So just light taps of ink, light presses, until you build up the saturation that you want. White ink, white pigment ink will stay wet for a while, so don't smear it with anything because that will ruin your sentiment, make it all smudgy, and that'll make you unhappy. So I'm going to be very careful when I line up my die so that I don't smear that white ink. You could hit it with a heat tool to make sure that it's dry before you move on. Due to time, I'm just going to move on, and if I smear it, it's a me problem. Okay, I did think about how I wanted to position these dies. For this one, I positioned the word at the very bottom because I wanted to overlap my die cut pieces, and I'll show you that when I get to this second card. But when I did this configuration, I decided to leave them separated. So I'm going to show you both ways. And I am hoping that I can get this whole thing cut out. My die is hanging off a little bit. So let's see if I can align it a little bit better. Okay, I am going to put a little piece of tape on that side also because it is very, very close. And again, that's because I'm trying to use up leftovers on my paper. If you have a good piece of paper that you're working on, you can just stamp it right in the middle of your paper and not worry about this alignment part. But because I'm trying to fit it and squeeze it all into these spaces, I have to be a little more careful with my alignment. Okay, let's see if that, it's very close, but I think we're gonna make it. And I do want to make sure I don't touch anything down between that die and smear the ink. Most of the time the die is thick enough that nothing will touch and smear your ink, but just know that it could happen if you don't let it dry before you're die cutting. Okay, that one looks like we made it. So I'm going to carefully peel my tape away because again, I don't want to smear that ink. And then I will set that with our card and move on to the second one. Okay, I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to set it where I know I will find it. I will clean those up later. I am going to help myself just a little bit by making sure that things are going to line up well enough, and I can just set things in place. I don't have to be exact at this point, but this will help me make sure they line up better and I don't have to work so hard. So carefully move the die out of the way. The stamp is in place where I want it to be. I did not put it on upside down because I've done that before. And then you stamp a big blob of shape instead of your actual letters. So here we go. Stamp, stamp, stamp. And like I said, I really like to get it saturated, so I'm doing that multiple times. But once you get the flow of it, it doesn't take that long. And then, okay, I am going to do this one at the bottom. This one is at the very bottom, as you can see. And I'm going to do this one at the very bottom also, so that I can maybe overlap my sentiments and show you that idea. Okay. And this is the last piece of our card. So let me get my stamp out of there so I don't lose track of it again. Put my tool away and get my last piece out. I did not use any foam tape on these layers, but one thing that I did think about is if you have a nice thin foam tape, you could glue this first layer flat, put one layer of foam tape underneath your next row, 2 layers of foam tape underneath the row after that, 3 layers, 4 layers, and you would get a 3-dimensional look to your card that would really step it up. And I didn't do that. I do have a little bit of thin foam tape, but part of the reason I didn't do that is that not everybody out there has that kind of foam tape. But if you want to give it a try, or if you don't mind your cards being super chunky, you can do it with a standard foam tape and it'll get really thick by this last layer. But you could always give it a try. You have so many extra pieces that you could just try it and see if it's too thick. It probably won't go through the mail very well, but you could always hand deliver one. So that was an additional idea. You can pop these ones up on foam tape if you want, or you can die cut stack them to give them a little more dimension. But what I wanted to do was, and I'm making mine read from bottom to top, because this is where the sound is coming from. So we're coming up this way, and then it says, I heard it's your birthday. So if somebody gets your card and they read it, it's your birthday, I heard, that will happen. But because I'm doing this in the kind of artful way, I am making it make sense from an artful design perspective. So I'm going to tuck this one down in here so that it fits in between my music notes. And then maybe I'll pop up that layer on foam because I didn't do that with anything else. So a little glue with this one. Just glue it down. Don't touch that wet ink. And then I'll add some foam to these ones. And yes, my ink is still wet, so I'm going to very carefully try to add these without touching that ink. And I know I'm being very paranoid, but I have smeared so much white ink in my history that I don't want to risk it. Okay, take those off. And I wanted to mount these on top of each other because you get a much more interesting look to the tails of the banner. Okay, and this is where I am going to carefully press down on my wet ink, and I will use, if I just press straight down and then come straight up, it shouldn't rub and smear, and that will finish off the card for today. So here is my original going off at an angle that cut off the fishtail banners of my card, and here is the one we made tonight that overlaps our banners and has more detail to the fishtail ends. And we've got the distress on our phone, and our phone cord goes off, so it makes you wonder what's happening in that unseen area of the card. That's a little thing that our brains like, is to kind of fill in the blanks of what's happening off screen, so to speak. And speaking of off screen, I will come back to my face and we can wrap up. So Donna, it sounds like you probably kept up and you were already on the stamping and using your tape to mask off your stamp steps. So hopefully you got your card finished. That is it for tonight. I will be back next month with another Advent All Year project. I don't have next month planned. Next month is July. I have August planned, and it's going to be a lot of die cutting. So maybe next month I'll try and do less die cutting again. But August I've got planned, and it's a lot of die cutting. September I've got planned, and it's a good amount of die cutting, but September is my favorite. Oh, I'm excited about September. So I hope you will come back and join me for the future months and the future projects. And Donna says she's really enjoyed my cards. Glad to have this one done and ready to send. Well, thank you so much, Donna, for being here. I'm glad you enjoyed them. I get giddy over this stuff, and if I can share it with other people and help you all be giddy and happy just playing with paper and glue and ink, that is what I love to do. So thank you for being here. Let's see, still working on the soup card. Yes, we did a soup card. Oh, that was not last month. Is that the month before? Can't remember, but all of these videos are up on replay. If you haven't seen the soup card, you can check out the playlist and find that. And I will be here again in July to share more cards with you. So stay tuned. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Donna, for hanging out with me tonight. And Donna's out of town. Yeah, I do host these on the 4th Friday of every month at 4 p.m. Pacific. So if that interferes with your schedule, you can always catch me on replay. And I love being here. Have an artful day. Have an artful month. Until I see you next time. Good night.